And there we go. And again, I want to welcome you all to our second Oscar webinar, Becoming an Oscar Certified Course Reviewer. We're thrilled that you're here, and thank you for those that are joining us from last week. We did have to reschedule this session. We're happy to see you back here today. So we look forward to what Alex has to share with us. Over to you, Alex.
Are we recording?
Yeah, yeah, we're
Okay,
good.
cool. All right. Hi, everyone. My name's Alejandra Pickett. You might know me as Alex. I am so happy to be here with you, spending our lunchtime together to talk about Oscar. This session is an introduction to Oscar for online course reviewers or faculty who might be interested in being peer reviewers. So if that's what you're hoping for, you're in the right place. I just wanted to mention, if you were here last week, I'm so sorry about the challenges that we had. I was completely dead in the water. The power and internet went out at midnight the night before the workshop and didn't come back on for 16 for the power and like 24 for the internet. So I was completely the first time in 6 years that I've been working remotely that I was completely without the ability to communicate. So thanks for coming back if you were here last week and are joining us today again. And if you're here, for the first time, then welcome. Go ahead and introduce yourselves in the chat so we can get a sense of who we are in the room together. I have mine turned off and the little gallery also turned off so I can see my screen. But my co-pilots Aline and Aaron are here with us to help manage the chat. And if you have a question or want to say something, they'll be monitoring the chat for us. I have a lot to go over with you all today. I usually introduce myself as Oscar's mom, and I'm incredibly proud of Oscar, who now I have found in all corners of the world as a tool that folks are adapting and using for their online course quality initiatives. You may know some things about Oscar. You may just be being introduced to Oscar for the first time. And I just want to make sure that we have a clear idea that I'm not going to teach you how to use Oscar in this session. We're going to give you an overview and an introduction to the tools and the materials and the resources. And we're going to look at a select group of standards to help you understand, some information about the standards, what the materials are associated with those standards, and how to apply them. And so that you have everything that you need to leave this workshop to go do a review of an online course. So you'll be well prepped with that. I've been doing this for a long time. Oscar was designed in my head probably in 1996, and so here at SUNY we've been working with online courses, online faculty, online instructional designers, and online teaching and learning in general to understand how to help people do it well, and both from the faculty perspective, the instructional design perspective, as well as the instructional designer perspective. And so, when you introduce yourself, if you could tell us if you are faculty and instructional designer, something else, or both, or many things, just so again, so we can have a sense of who's in the room. Excuse me, who's in the room with us. Before I go too much further, I want to let you know that all of the materials that I'm going to be showing you today, you can find in this bit.ly link. And that link will take you to a Google folder that has everything that I'm going to be showing you today. The slides are here, the page of links are here. And if you can see my browser, you'll see there's a ton of links up there, and I'm going to be going through all of them. They are all on this page of links. So you don't have to worry about capturing screenshots or URLs or anything. All of the information is going to be here for you in this resource so that you can return to it later when you would like to review or revisit some of that information. So that's the link. I'm sure Erin has posted it in the chat a couple of times by now. So again, we're going to be doing an overview of the rubric. And we're going to talk about the associated tools and resources. And I'm going to show you how to get access to OSCQR. And there's a couple of different tools that I'm going to introduce you to as someone who might be interested in doing course reviews. If you're an instructional designer or a peer, someone who wants to do a peer review of a peer's course, getting the version of OSCQR that you would like to use for this would be something that you will get out of this workshop. And then I have a bunch of bonus stuff at the end to share with you and to include you in. Some, an overview of our timeline. I mentioned I had designed OSCQR in my head probably in 1996, and we had checklists at the time that we worked with instructional designers and faculty with probably starting around 1996. We formalized those checklists, but it wasn't until 2013 that we began to actually design OSCQR as a rubric. We did it as an initiative in our Open SUNY phase under Chancellor Nancy Zimpher, and we did it for a variety of reasons. We had used our own sort of internally designed rubric for many, many years. We then adopted Quality Matters and used Quality Matters for many, many years. We all got trained, and we trained faculty, and that rubric is an amazing rubric. It's one of the earliest rubrics out there, and I always say any rubric is better than no rubric. But for several reasons, we decided to develop our own and rolled it out with our Open SUNY Plus initiative that was back in 2014, 15 or so, and have continued to work on it and develop it. And we're now currently in version 4 of the rubric, and we're in the beginning stages of planning version 5, which will address improving our accessibility standards. We're going to look at AI. We're going to look at inclusive online teaching practices and mobile learning. I think those are the main things that will be going into OSCQR 5. So yeah, there's the timeline. If you are not familiar with OSCQR, I would recommend that you take a look at this video. It gives a 5-minute overview of everything that OSCQR is and that it does. And if you're talking to your colleagues or to your director or to your distance learning group or committee, and you want to have a quick way to sort of fully encapsulate what OSCQR is and what it does and kind of how it does, what it's intended to do, this video is a great resource. So I would recommend that you take a look at that at some point and share it if you're trying to adopt OSCQR or share information about OSCQR. This is a great resource to have to do that. I will tell you That Oscar is unique in many ways, and we developed it very intentionally to serve our specific needs within SUNY. SUNY is the State University of New York. If you're from outside of SUNY, and we have 64 institutions, everything from doctoral institutions to 30 community colleges, and FIT and maritime and hospitals are also included in that. And so we had some very unique circumstances that really precluded us from using any of the other rubrics that were out there. We had a very, very well developed, thoughtful online faculty development process. So our faculty were, over the course of their online faculty development processes and their course design processes, were well trained, and so we needed workshops and training and tools that would assist us and understand and recognize that they had already been through very rigorous work with their online instructional designers at their campuses. And, there's 64 institutions, lots of different types of institutions and types of supports at each of the institutions. And so when I say that, they were all very well developed and thoughtfully, trained, and there's a range that I'm talking about across all those 64 institutions. But nevertheless, we really needed to work within the context that we had. And so developing Oscar became something that we needed to do in order to roll out the Open SUNY Plus initiatives that we had at that time. That's back in 2014 or so. So Oscar was intentionally designed to support a culture of online course design continuous improvement, and to support the relationship between the online instructional designer and the faculty they worked with. We didn't want there to be, or to, sort of encourage or support any kind of confrontation. We wanted it to be a very supportive relationship. And so Oscar was intentionally designed to be non-evaluative. So one of the first things I say about Oscar is it's not a scorecard and you can't fail Oscar. So it's not intended as a course or a faculty evaluation tool. It's intentionally designed to be extensible and flexible to accommodate additions to the standards, modifications to the standards, elimination of standards. That is so that it can be adapted by anyone for the use cases that they may have. And of course, it's freely available and it's openly licensed, so it's licensed for you to be able to do that. It's not restricted to mature courses or experienced online faculty. In fact, we advocate and promote and recommend that the tool be used with new online faculty so that they can understand the effective practices that go into the design of an online course and build those in as they are building. In our model, the faculty build their own courses. So as they are building their first online courses, they have those standards that they are working towards as they develop their content and the structure of their courses. There's an action plan that gets generated as a result of doing an Oscar review that identifies the things that either the reviewer or the instructor, if they're doing a self-assessment, identify as needing improvement. So really, the instructional designer who's looking at the course or the peer reviewer are looking at a course from a particular set of categories of standards and then individual standards to determine, how present those things are and in the course, and then those things that they identify that need some improvement, along with the suggestions to make those improvements, create the action plan. And the action plan is intended to help the instructor and the instructional designers or reviewers prioritize things to improve in the course. So the understanding or the implication of that is that the course is never done. If we're talking about online course design continuous improvement, you may find courses that have a ton of stuff that needs improvement, but they will pick 2 or 3 things to improve for the next time the course is taught. And then the understanding in continuous improvement is that they would come back to their list and continue to make decisions about what to improve next. The same is true with courses that are already very well designed. The understanding is that there is always something that can be improved. So the intention of OSCQR is not to check off a course and say it's done and as now, meets these requirements or whatever, and you're done. The intention is that with OSCQR you will continuously look at the design of the course, the content of the course, the activities of the course, the feedback and the assessments of the course, the technology, the skills of the instructor, and there we also continue to learn more about how people can teach and learn well online. So all of those things can be implemented to continuously improve the design of the course. We also within OSCQR have specifically targeted accessibility and regular and substantive interaction to assist and inform compliance efforts. Again, I said it was openly licensed to enable you to adapt it in whatever ways you need to. And the other piece that makes it unique, I think, is that it's intended to flexibly accommodate a variety of types of course review and refresh continuous improvement model. So within SUNY, again, with our 64 campuses, we have some campuses that have instructional designers who have formal roles and authority and responsibilities for online course design quality. And we have some campuses where that is not the case, and everything in between. Some campuses that are doing peer review models, some campuses where they have multiple roles in terms of the review. So maybe a multimedia person or videographer, maybe a librarian, maybe a student and the subject matter expert, and everything in between. So it was intended to be able to accommodate both self-assessment and informal types of reviews and refreshes, and then more formal types of reviews and refreshes that might include a formal review by an instructional designer or teams of people looking to improve courses, whether those would be peer reviewers or sort of multidisciplinary folks. So those are the main things that I think distinguish OSCQR from other rubrics. And I mentioned that you can't fail OSCQR, and I wrote recently a whole blog post. So if you're interested in more details about sort of the spirit behind OSCQR and continuous improvement, you can take a look at that blog post. So OSCQR is not just a rubric. It is also a set of materials and resources that assist in online course review and refresh. And this is the OSCQR website. Under the About page, you'll find all kinds of information about OSCQR, including that video that I mentioned. You'll find that graphic about the process and the continuous improvement, and you'll find all those details that I mentioned about OSCQR being unique. And so if you're looking for additional information about OSCQR, you can find it there. Each of there's 50 standards, and they're broken up into 6 categories, and you can see them here listed: course overview, technology, design, content, interaction, and feedback. And each of the standards are set up the same way. So you'll see the standard itself, and so if you go under examples, oh, now my browser's not working. Okay, right there. And then you click on that and you see standard 1. And so that's how I got to this page here that we're looking at. And so standard 1, it is about the course, including a welcome and getting started content. And you'll see that it starts with a review of the standard. So it gives a short description of the standard. There's a little mini learning video that accompanies each standard as well. you'll see this icon up at the top that indicates that this standard has been associated with regular and substantive interaction in some way. And some of the standards directly support RSI, and some of them, depending on how they're articulated, could be leveraged to support RSI. And so my screen is frozen at the moment. So below the video and the short description will be some tips and ideas of how you would address the standard for that particular standard, how you might improve, and there'll be a lot of links and information about how somebody who is looking to review a course or self-assess the design of their course could come here and find some ideas that would information how to improve that particular standard. Every page also includes a section on that has some citations that support the standard, as these are all evidence-based standards. And then it also includes some additional, like if you're interested in going diving a little bit deeper into some of that, the information, there's some information like supplemental information, and then there's always the ability to comment, and there's always the ability to share a practice. So we would review those things periodically and then add them to this document, so that we're collaboratively co-creating shared resources on how to address a particular standard. All right, let's see if I can get my computer to move, and I cannot. So let me
Alex, could I
stop
have
sharing for
you
a
turn
second.
off? Alex, could I have you turn off your video? You're glitching a bit, and we're going to try to eliminate the bandwidth as much as we can.
Oh yeah, that's a great idea. So I'm frozen at the moment, completely frozen. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you and we can see your screen. So.
Okay, it's not letting me do anything. Can you make me stop sharing?
You have stopped sharing. And
Oh,
we
I
did stop
have.
your video as well.
Okay, so you stopped my video. So I'm still frozen here. Uh, all right. Well, the next standard is, the next thing that I was going to show was how to get Oscar. Do you think you could share
You
that
sure?
page on?
Yep, I'll be sharing while you go through everything.
Okay.
So go right ahead.
Okay. I don't see you sharing yet, though.
It's coming.
Oh, there it is. All right. So like I said, each standard is set up consistently and has all the same elements. Yeah, that'd be great if you could just scroll down a little bit so we can see all of them are set up like this. And so refresh your course with these ideas. And then if it's related to RSI, there'll be a section on that, and then a place where you can get additional ideas and then leave a comment, or you can see Erin is showing this particular one, which was the first one about a course welcome. It's got stuff on doing a little welcome video and those kinds of things. So and then additional resources down at the bottom. So in the getting started page, there's a little breadcrumb trail above across the top of the Oscar rubric, the web page. And if you click on Get Oscar, that's where you go for any time you want to make sure that you have the most current version of Oscar, you would go there. And if you want the PDF version, you would click on download the 4.0 PDF version. And we have one in Spanish also. If you are interested or have colleagues that might be interested in Oscar in Spanish, it's available. And then we also have the Oscar rubric as an interactive online tool. And so you may be familiar with the rubric, the PDF version of the rubric. That's Erin is showing that right now. You might be familiar with that. But we also have the the interactive version of the rubric. And for course reviewers, I want to show this, and hopefully, Erin, you can click on links for the demo. So there's a demo of the rubric and a demo of the dashboard. And so Erin's showing you right now how to, you fill out that form and it'll send you an email for you to generate your own interactive version of the rubric. And the interactive version of the rubric is really a very fancy online Google spreadsheet. And we've incorporated a bunch of additional interactive components to the interactive version of the rubric. And, and, and what you can do, things that will allow you to do with multiple tabs. So there's one for an instructional designer, there's one the faculty, and there's one that can be, somebody else, either a peer or a student, or, so we've got three set up. You can always add more if you had more people. And so each person would be assigned one of those tabs. So if you're the instructional designer doing the reviewer, you would do your review from the instructional design tab. Are you able to bring up the demo thing, Erin?
Doesn't
And
look like it. I
so you
requested
would
it.
fill it out. Oh, okay. All right. Okay. So it'll let you, it'll give you some interactive components to it. So it's just like the PDF version, only it has extra tabs and it has some interactive components to it. The main interactive component that it does is it aggregates from each of the tabs all of the feedback that gets put into it. So if it's just an instructional designer doing the review, that's all that'll go into the action plan. If it's multiple people, then anything that anyone puts into the interactive version of the rubric will go into the action plan. So the action plan aggregates all the feedback. It also will list the time to complete, the estimated time to complete that particular fix or improvement of that particular standard. And then it will assign whether or not it's important or essential, whether or not that standard is important or essential. Now, we have a position on that. We've taken we have an opinion about what's important, which standards are important and which are essential. Because this is an openly licensed tool, if you differ in opinion, or if you have a particular discipline or program that has different emphasis on different standards, you can change that and make your own categories for what's important and what's essential. And the reason, the two things that we do is identify important and essential, and we also rate each standard according to how much time it would take to complete. Again, it's non-evaluative, so it's really looking at how much time would it take someone to address this fix or this improvement, and that is intended to help faculty and instructional designers prioritize improvements to a course. So depending on your context, time might be an issue. So if you only have 3 weeks before the course goes live, you're going to want to try and hit things that are going to have the highest impact and take the least amount of time. If you have more time to improve a course, then you might want to also then look at what would have the most impact and take some additional time, or if you need to develop some additional skills or get some additional report in order to address a particular standard, then you'd have more time to do that. And the tool is helping you to make those decisions, those assessments. So the other tool that I wanted to show you is the dashboard, and the interactive dashboard. Aline or Erin, are you able to get into that one? The interactive dashboard is intended for folks who are doing larger scale online course quality initiatives, and it allows you as the manager of one of those initiatives to uh, um, generate a large bunch of related with specific courses and people, and then to manage them. So you can see on the screen, I have in that demo, I have several courses listed, and you can see that in the first one, Introduction to Watercolors, the instructional designer has completed their review, so has the faculty person, and so has reviewer one. And there's nothing left to improve on the course. The instructional designer assigned is Bill, and then this course, based on my notes, is that it's ready to be made live tomorrow. You can see that this in the list, which is Introduction to Online Teaching. The instructional designer has started the review, but the faculty and the reviewer have not yet begun. And so then I make notes there for self as manage this process on what needs to happen next. In the access. But anyway, there's a drop-down menu. This is a tool. It's an application that was developed around a Google spreadsheet, and that so it has things that need to be configured and that can assist you to configure things. So you can generate rubrics. You can change the rubric and want to apply it all to your nursing program only. You can generate a rubric that is specific for that, and then you can generate multiple rubrics from that in this dashboard and assign them to people and then manage them from this dashboard. So I'm sharing that with you because as a reviewer who might be in charge of a larger scale initiative, you might want to leverage both the interactive rubric as well as this dashboard tool to assist you to manage a larger scale project. If you are just an individual instructional designer doing a handful of courses, or your faculty and you just want to do your own course, of course you can use the interactive rubric, and there's no problem with that. You just go get it from the Get Oscar page. But the PDF would also serve you just as well. It just won't have some of those interactive features in it. Okay, so let's go to the next section, which is we're going to go. I handpicked a few standards for us to go through and to look at and to see if and to share some notes about how you might apply it and what might be important in a particular standard. And so the first one that I selected for us to take a look at is 3, and standard 3 is about the course, including a course information area and a syllabus that makes course expectations clear and findable. And so it's really important, to get a course started off on the right foot. And so having all of that upfront information that students are looking for when they're first starting an online course is super important. So one of the first resources I wanted to share with you, Erin, it looks like I can share again. Shall I try?
I'm not sure, Alex. You're breaking up on and off too, so we may want to just keep going.
Okay, let's just keep it. Yeah, let's just keep it. So the first resource is the syllabus, the syllabus template that we created. And I wanted to share this with you. So this is a template and a model. So you can use it in either of those two contexts. You can take it and make a copy of it, and then adapt it for your own course, or set of programs, or however you would like to use it, or you can just take it and compare your own syllabi with it to make sure that you're hitting all of the things in syllabi that should potentially be in there to make things easier and more findable for online students. And you'll see that each element in this model is associated with an OSCQR rubric. So everything that's in it is associated with an OSCQR rubric. And of course, you would remove that text if you were going to like take a copy of it and adapt it. You'd fill it in with your own content and remove anything that that says remove. And so a couple of things I want to point out that are unique in the syllabus is that there's a section on regular and substantive interaction. If you scroll down a little bit, you'll find it right there. And then, and so, this is one of the easy ways that at the institutional level or at the programmatic level, you can articulate how the courses are intending to meet that particular regulation. And so all of that text is customizable and it aligns with several OSCQR standards. The other thing I want to point out here is that a little further down, you'll see a section on the use of artificial intelligence. And so the intention here is that every course should have a statement about how the instructor, the program, or the institution feels about or is allowing or sort of allowing or not allowing the use of AI. And so whatever the stance is, it should be in the syllabus and in the course also, but at the very least in the syllabus. And yeah, so take a look at that and see, use it either as a model or as something to compare with what you currently have and to see if there's anything that you could improve in your syllabi for specifically for online students. I also want to share with you a paper that was written some time ago, but that when I first saw it blew my mind. And the author's Bethany Suminich, and the article is called "The Impact of Findability on Student Motivation, Self-Efficacy, and Perceptions of Online Course Quality." And this literally blew my mind when I first read it because I had been advocating for years and years and years. I didn't use the word findability, but I used the word deconstructed syllabus or words deconstructed syllabus, and was encouraging instructional designers and faculty in their online courses to essentially deconstruct their syllabus and create individual documents within an area called course information that addressed the main important categories of information that an online student needs to have right when they enter a course. They want to know how to contact you. They want to know how they're going to be evaluated. They want to know what the books are. They want to know what to do next. So they need very specific things. And if they don't find those things like immediately, and it's like within seconds of wanting to have that information, then things happen. Not good things happen in the minds of the students. And when this paper came out, it put research behind this intuitive sort of, anecdotal observations that I'd been having in the big numbers of faculty that we had been able to work with at the time. So one of the main things that the paper found was that students reported lower levels of self-efficacy and motivation after interacting with courses rated low in findability. So findability means I'm looking for a specific piece of information, how to contact my instructor, and I can't find it. So this paper did eye tracking study and surveyed the students and found that students in courses with low findability reported lower levels of self-efficacy. That means they believed that they couldn't be successful in the course because they couldn't find something. And they couldn't find it because it was buried somewhere in a PDF, in a syllabus that was further buried in a folder, in another folder, somewhere in the course. So this is really important because not only do the students feel like they can't succeed in the course, but the other piece that blew my mind was they perceive that the instructor is not qualified to teach the course. That's the first day that they're looking at the course. So to me, like it blew my mind. I love this study. Um, and it's an important piece of understanding when you're designing an online course, this understanding of findability, and that is important to set the tone immediately in a course and throughout the course. That speaks to consistency, not only within the course but also across courses, across programs, across institutions. The wrapper around which the course the wrapper around which the instructor has their content, some consistency and findability in that wrapper is super essential for students to feel like they can succeed and for them to have good experiences, successful experiences, and perceptions about the course and the instructor and themselves in the course. Okay, so the next document, the types of information that I was talking about when I talked about a deconstructed syllabus. If you have a really good syllabus and it's really upfront and easy to find, it's not necessarily to do this, but different institutions have different rules and regulations around syllabi. And so if there's not anything in your syllabus that is specific to the online student, then you're going to want to reinforce those things within the course information in the documents of the online course. So right up front in your learning management system, you want to have some documents that give a welcome, that provide contact information, that articulate the objectives of the course, the readings, what they're going to be doing, how they're going to be evaluated, what the instructor's expectations are, the course schedule, and any policies that are relevant to the course. And of course, a way to print and download the syllabus, and then exactly what they're supposed to do next. So there's my example of a deconstructed syllabus, and you can click on that link at your leisure and look at some examples of those things, if you're interested. Let's go on to Standard 9, Erin, and look at objectives. As an instructional designer or someone who's reviewing a course, one of the first things that you're going to want to look at, and objectives are still in the Standard 9 is still in the course overview and information category of standards. One of the first things that you're going to want to look at are the course objectives. How are they articulated? So when you're giving feedback to someone and you're looking at the course, you go try and find the syllabus and compare the syllabus with the model that I showed you to see if anything's missing, or could you make any recommendations on how to improve that, either within the syllabus or within the context of the course. And then look at the course information documents for the stated course objectives. The document How Not to Write Objectives is a resource that I have shared with you in that list of links, and I like it because it was done a long time ago by a professor. I can't remember where he's from, but I liked it because he has listed how poorly written objectives and some better written objectives, and the difference is the verb, honestly. And so if you're looking at an instructor's objectives and it says the student will know or the student will understand, those objectives can be improved. And as an instructional designer, you're probably not unfamiliar with Bloom's taxonomy, and Bloom's is a model that can help you understand how to articulate objectives well. There's lots of different ways to do this, but Bloom's is a really good framework to use. And it talks about the knowledge dimension, which goes from concrete knowledge to abstract knowledge. And so that's things that are factual to conceptual to procedural to metacognitive. So that's the knowledge dimension. And then it talks about the cognitive process dimension, which deals with lower order thinking skills like remember, understand, apply, to higher order thinking skills that encompass analyzing, evaluating, and creating. And so when you're looking at objectives, at stated learning objectives for a course, you want to see a variety of elements from the knowledge dimension and the cognitive process dimension, not just everything at factual, unless that's what the course is actually about and all they need to do is memorize pharmacological terms or something like that. But typically, in a course, you're going to want to hit a little bit across all of them, depending on the level of the course and the discipline, of course. So some resources for you would include, in order for you to give some good constructive feedback to an instructor on improving their objectives, you want to have some resources that will help you and help them think about each of those levels in blooms, some good verbs that go with those, and some good things to think about related to that. So some questions that you might pose related to that level and with those verbs, and then some activities or products or interactions or outcomes that could be used in order to address that particular objective. So I've shared a few resources with you to help you look at objectives and help give some constructive analysis and feedback to the course, to the person whose course you're reviewing. All right. So another thing that comes up when looking at course, the standard, which is about the objectives being clearly defined, measurable, and aligned with learning activities and assessments. Another thing that comes up often is instructors feeling like they have to put everything that they know in the course because they feel they don't see the instructor, and so they need to put everything that they know in the course. And what ends up happening is it becomes like a course and a half or more, and not possible to do in the amount of time that there is in a day, for example. So I did a resource that can help instructional designers and faculty looking to understand this issue a little bit better, and it's calculating time on task. And so if you can see in a 15-week course, there should be 9 hours of work per week in your online course, and that's a total of 135 total hours of work that would go on in the course. Now, to help you to quantify that a little bit more, there's a resource from Wake Forest University called the Workload Estimator, which is a really cool tool. Now, it's going to give you an idea so that you can just check. So if you're reviewing a course and you want to see, is this course, does it have, enough stuff in it or for the students to do related to the objectives, related to the content, related to the activities, related to the assessments? Is there enough, or is it too much? And so that course workload estimator, you can plug in numbers and it will generate an estimate of total work hours, independent hours, and contact hours. And you can see, if you start fiddling around with it, you can see how if you manipulate the numbers in any way, you can automatically see the workload estimates change. So it's not a perfect tool, but it can give you a rough estimate if you're doing a review of a course to see if how the course is doing in terms of workload. And then it gives you something to talk about with the instructor to help them better understand how to align the objectives with content, with activities, with assessments, and with feedback, so that the course doesn't end up bloating and becoming more than the student is able to do within the hours of the day. There's a couple of other tools in the links document. There's a learning objectives creator that Arizona State University has put out. So I'll invite you to go play around with that. It'll actually, ask you what your subject matter is, what your course level is, what the objective scope is, what the Bloom's level is that you're interested in targeting, and then how many objectives. And then you can give some additional information on a specific thing, and then you can hit a button and it'll generate some objectives for you to take a look at to see what it does, and then you can might get some ideas of how you might improve an objective, or how you might or how the tool is articulating an objective to hit a particular level of blooms. So it's a nice little tool for you to check out when you have when you're working on a course and wanna give some good constructive feedback to the instructor. All right, let's go on to standard 16. I chose that one. Let's see. Standard 16 is in the design and layout section, and it has to do with navigation, course navigation. And it wants, it's suggesting that a logical, consistent, and uncluttered layout be established, and that the course be easy to navigate. And that's, both with color scheme and layout and content organization and chunking, and actually also titles as advanced organizers of content. And so for this standard, you know, um, courses can be chunked in as many different ways as there are faculty. So it can be topical, it can be done by time, it can be done by date and time, it can be done by chapters in a book, it can be done by metaphor, it can be done by steps in a process. So there's lots of different ways to chunk a course. And that the instructor, decides how they want to chunk a course. But if you're a reviewer looking at a course and you see 35 modules, you're going to want to give that instructor some feedback about that, because we know that the magic number of modules is 7 plus or minus 2. So if there's more than 9 modules, or if there's less than 5 modules, we know from the research that we've done that both the faculty and the students will rate that lower on their satisfaction and also on their perception of learning from both faculty and students. So it doesn't mean that you can't have 35 chunks of a course. You just need to chunk them further into 7 or plus or minus 2 or overarching chunks, and you want to make sure that those chunks have contextually relevant titles, so that when you're looking at it, you don't just see module 1, module 2, module 3. You have module 1, cellular processes, module 2, biological processes, module 3, reproductive processes. So you want to give it and give the structure with the labels that you have some purpose, so that students can use those as advanced organizers to understand the content at a glance before they actually even go into the module. And that way you're leveraging the tools and the stuff that you have available to you to help make that content more understandable, more findable, more interesting to the student. It also conveys personality of the instructor and the positionality of the instructor of the content. So every biology instructor is going to probably have different ways that they chunk their course, or that they label the chunks of their course, and that is also important contextual information to share with the students. All right, so I'm going to share real quickly with you the templates that we have developed that are aligned with OSCQR. So if you're looking to help someone improve the design of their course, and the course is very disorganized and lacks consistency, or if you're working with a department or a program and you want to recommend something that could assist them to have that findability, that wrapper around the course content that is the faculty's purview, you could take one of these templates. They're openly licensed and freely available, and adapt them to your institutional programmatic context. They're all OSCQR aligned, and so you can take it and do whatever you would like with it. They are built in Brightspace, but they have been exported in a common cartridge, so you can import them into Canvas or Blackboard or some other tool that you might be using, and then adapt them however you would like. And there's information that goes along with the with each of the different modalities. So the asynchronous modality is one of them, but we have them all the way from asynchronous to face-to-face modalities. So whichever one you adapt, there's going to be a document that talks about how it's aligned with OSCQR, and there'll be other documentation that goes with it if you're interested in adapting it for whatever your context might be. But this is a very quick way to quick start faculty into good, effective OSCQR-aligned course designs. And if you're able to do that, to share a template across multiple courses in a program or across your institution, you can get some of that consistency, that systematic, consistency that's so important for this online student experience, for the success and the successful experience of the online students, and that findability that we were talking about. It's a quick way to do that. All right, so let's go to standard 24, which is about displaying information in a linear format. So the standards that are in design and layout, in the design and layout category of OSCQR, a lot of them have to do with accessibility. And as we know, April 2026 is coming up, and we are obliged to now have everything really be accessible. So these standards are quite important, especially, they've always been important, but they're especially important now to help our faculty and our departments and our institutions be compliant with this regulation. So one of the things that you can target and you can look for in a course is how do they use tables, and are they designing those tables in a way that maximizes the if they have to use a table, that is going to be friendly if a screen reader comes across it. And so one of the things that you need to do with tables is to make sure that the cells are designed with the intended headers, that they're coded appropriately to ensure that the screen reader is going to be able to read them appropriately. And as you may know, I have some resources in the links document. If it's not formatted correctly, all it will do is read directly across each of the rows. And so it'll read all of the headers, and then it'll read all of the next line, and then all of the next line and the next line. And so you're basically getting, something that's incomprehensible, really. You're not going to be able to understand the intent of the table with that. It's really hard for a screen reader, which is why, for people who are using them, tables present some more of an issue. So it's recommended to try and avoid tables as much as possible. But if you have to use a table, you need to be able to describe it in narrative, and then also have it formatted appropriately so that the screen reader can read it in a way that is more comprehensible than not. And I have an example of what it
Table
sounds
with 8 columns and 5 rows. Fall term freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, post-bac, non-dash degree, total 2007, 42, 40, 32, 18, 34, 18, 46, 39, 344, 300.
Could you hear that, Aaron? I can't hear you. Okay. Aline said yes. Okay, great. Great, great, great. Okay. So you can play that yourself and look at the resources in the links document, so that you can see, exactly what it sounds like and what it looks like when you do it without the appropriate coding. Aline put together this amazing website for us, and checklist. It's a rubric, really, on accessibility. So if you're looking for some tips to share with your instructor, the course that you're reviewing, if you have some tips on accessibility that you want to share with them, this is a nice set of 10 tips that you can look for yourself as you're reviewing the course, and then chat with your instructor on how they might improve some of the things that they're doing in the course based on these tips. And then you can also take a look at the checklist that is on that page. If you're doing like a review that's focused on accessibility, this checklist is really focused on accessibility. And so it can help you and streamline that process and give you information in order to address and improve the course design and content and everything with the accessibility standards in mind. And so, you know, that is one way that you can look at. If you're doing a course review, you could just review it for accessibility, especially with the deadline coming up, and then just go over all of the ways that the instructor can improve the accessibility of the course. And that would have some, you know, important impact on the design of the course for that course and the instructor, as well as for the institution. Okay, so let's go on to Standard 29, and Standard 29 is in the content and activities section. So we've gone down to the content and activities section, and this standard talks about the course offering a variety of engaging resources to present content, support learning and collaboration, and facilitate regular and substantive interaction. So for this particular standard, I wanted to talk about a couple of things, and that has to do with active learning and designing activities in the course that are you know, that are engaging, that are collaborative, interactive, and that really, you know, in some ways, sometimes with new online faculty, you'll see that they are trying to duplicate what they do in the classroom. And you know, that could be improved most likely. And so, so you want to help faculty see, rather than trying to duplicate things, how they might reconceptualize an activity that they're trying to do to achieve a particular objective in a way that you know, leverages the options and mitigates, you know, some of the challenges with a largely online text-based asynchronous environment, right? So there's a resource from the University of Illinois at Springfield called Online Instructional Activities Index. And I love this resource because it shows a bunch of things that a face-to-face instructor might be interested in or familiar with, like case briefs or debate or journaling or interviews or role playing. And it fishbowl, it does a whole bunch of things. It shows a whole bunch of different types of activities that one would be familiar with in a face-to-face environment, but then not so much in an online environment. And so in order to, you know, think about how you might expand the repertoire of types of activities that an instructor might use in order to achieve a particular learning objective, this might help. So I chose for this one debate. So I just, you know, I clicked at one of those, and debate seems to be something that one would think might not be possible in an online environment. And what I like about this resource is that it really gives you, you know, a lot of information in order to set up an activity. So some goals and objectives, some prerequisites in terms of materials and guiding questions, and then an outline for how you would actually implement the activity. And it actually tells you that how you could do it synchronously or asynchronously, and some details about how you might do that, and in terms of teaching strategies, maybe some accommodations if those were needed, how much time it would take, and so forth. And so it does this with every one of those activities that were on that initial page. And so this is a resource that you could mine if you're trying to give some feedback to an instructor on the design of an activity. If it's not designed to take maximal advantage of the environment, or if it's just the same type of activity that's not very interactive or engaging, you might look through these activities to see if there's something that would resonate with the instructor or that would fit well with an objective that they have and their content. I also want to point you to a wonderful resource by our friends at the University of Central Florida. They have a database called Topper, and Topper stands for Teaching Online Something Resources. Aaron, you probably know what it stands for, but anyway, it's a repository. It was grant funded, this repository. The people submit things to it, and there's a particular, process for that and format for that, and the activities or the things that are submitted are peer reviewed and then get included in the repository or not, depending on whether they meet the criteria or not. And so if you go into Topper and search on debate, there's 3 right off the bat: using VoiceThread for debate, incorporating online debates to stimulate critical thinking and engagement, and using online debates to enhance classroom engagement. And each of those is a full, documented, research-based articulation of how to do that particular thing. So you can mine Topper for ideas also. And we've incorporated into OSCQR. We crosswalked our standards with Topper, with the Topper repository, and we've done that a couple of times to continue to add to it. But you can go straight to Topper and do a search right from there on whatever it is that you might be looking to improve. So there's a number of other resources in the links document that you can mine to help you think about active learning approaches, active learning strategies, things to do besides lecturing in an online course that will be interactive, collaborative, and engaging for the students. All right, let's go to standard 30. And this standard 30 is also in the content and activities category. And this standard provides activities for learners to develop higher order thinking and problem solving skills, such as critical reflection and analysis. And again, maybe this reminds you of Bloom's. And at the bottom of one of the Bloom's resources that I shared, there's this cool, reminds me of a video game called Qbert, but it's a bunch of little squares all together, and you can sort of go on the cognitive process dimension and on the knowledge dimension and kind of look to see, if you want to hit the create level there of the cognitive process dimension and the factual level, you could generate a log of daily activities. If you want to evaluate, if you want to hit that, make judgments based on criteria and standards, and then hit the conceptual level, the interrelationship among the basic elements within a larger structure, you could determine relevant results and so forth. So you can use that to help you to think about the activities that you're doing and how they are assisting learners to develop higher order thinking skills. So that would be hitting the top 3 of Bloom's for critical thinking and problem solving, reflection and analysis. So again, those Bloom's tools will help you with that. I want to mention a little bit about AI and Bloom's, again, related to this particular standard. There's a couple of resources that I've shared in the links document that shows what the level of Bloom's is and how AI might be able to assist you with that, and then specifically what tools might be able to be leveraged for those particular use cases. And then there's another one put out by our friends at Oregon State, eCampus, wonderful organization. They have an incredible repository of research there related to online. if you're interested in that. But this is also a quick little cheat sheet that can show you how you might how you might use AI to support learning at the various levels of Bloom. So take a look at that at some point. And depending on the course you're reviewing and what's going on in the course, whether the instructor is using it or not using it, or there might be a use case where it might be helpful if they're having a particular problem that this might help address, then you can take a look at some of these resources and use them to come up with some constructive suggestions to support improving this particular standard. All right, and then I have an example from my own instruction to share with you about what I do is I have my students' blog, and it is in effect a metacognitive journaling activity that they do. And every student is required to do it. They keep a blog alongside, as they go through my course, they are asked to keep this public blog. It's an actual blog. It's public. It's not private. If it's private, it's called a journal, not a blog. If it's public and anyone in the world can look at it, it's called a blog. And so I have a variety of reasons of why I ask them to do this. I want them to understand how to write for a public audience. I want them to understand how to develop an online professional way of speaking. And I also want them to think deeply about what they're learning, how they're applying what they're learning, and how they know they are learning. So that's the metacognitive aspect of it. And so on this document that's in the links document, you can see what I do, why I do it, how I did it, and then all of the questions that I ask that are associated with the student blogs. And then students read each other's blogs. I read everybody's blogs. We can all comment on each other's posts, and we build community outside the context of the LMS and share our thoughts with a public audience. So that's just for this particular standard, one of the ways that I address it. All right, let's go to standard 38. And standard 38 is about regular and substantive instructor to student expectations. A predictable and scheduled interactions and feedback are part of that. And they're present and appropriate for the length of the course, the structure, and are easy to find. So this is the spirit of RSI. If you're not familiar with this Department of Education regulation, I will invite you to come back later this semester. I do a whole webinar on regular and substantive interaction and talk about the narrow scope of this regulation and provocatively say that it has absolutely nothing to do with online course quality or with the quality of online instruction. It really is just a tool that the DOE uses to tell the difference between correspondence courses and online education for the purposes of financial aid, period. And so if you're interested in learning more about that and what the implications are at the campus level, the course design level, and the faculty level, I invite you to come back to that particular session. This particular standard really is talking about that, how you can design into a course interaction that is proactive and scheduled by the instructor to the student. And so that's the spirit of RSI, and that's what this particular standard is about. The next standard is standard 42 that I wanted to talk about, which is the other half of that coin. The course offers opportunities for learner-to-learner interaction and constructive collaboration. You won't have a well-designed course if it only meets the letter of RSI, because RSI is specific to instructor to student interaction. But as instructional designers or anyone who's taught an online course that, and done it well, you'll know that it requires student to student interaction, student to content interaction, student individual interaction with them, with themselves. It's more than just, instructor pushing information to the learners. So this standard 42 is about the course offering opportunities for that type of learner to learner interaction. And so the resource that I have to share with you about that is tips for small group work. So there's lots of ways to promote student to student interaction. But one of the ways that you can do that is with small group work. And if you've ever tried small group work yourself and had some challenges, there are lots of things to assist you to understand what's going on, and how you might improve those things. And, things like how large the group is or small, how prepared the students are in order to do the group work, how students get into the groups, how well you have articulated, or the instructor has articulated the expectations and the instructions for the group work, how easy it is for them to get started, what the point of the activity is. Is it clear? Do they understand what they're doing, why, or where they're supposed to do it, what the outcome is supposed to be? And then have they been adequately prepared, before engaging in the group work? Have they been adequately prepared to do it? Were there any lower stakes activities to scaffold them into the skills they're going to need in order to pull off a group project or some kind of group work? So we have an instructor last semester who gave a talk for us, Karen Caldwell, who talks a lot about how to design group work well. And if you haven't heard of her, or if you haven't seen that video, I would recommend it to you. We have it in a playlist that I'll show you in a little while. And you can take a look at that. You can take a look at that and see what she has to say about it. It's really, really well done. And she's a education professor from Potsdam, and really talks about the cognitive aspects of learning and what's important in order to activate the different processes that are necessary in order to learn. So it's really fascinating. If you're an instructional designer, you would probably really enjoy it. All right, let's go to standard 45. And
hey Alex, I just wanted to give you a heads up that we're just a couple minutes over 10 minutes remaining with at least one question.
Thank you. Thanks. We've got 45 and 50 still to go, and then we'll open up for questions, okay? So this one is about authentic methods of assessment, and what I want to recommend in this particular category are rubrics, and also activities that are, maybe alternative forms of assessment. So, instead of, really high stakes midterm multiple choice test, which is probably not the best type of assessment in an online asynchronous environment, you might want to consider some alternative forms of assessment. And it's not to say that multiple choice is not a good tool to use, but to have it be high stakes, like 50% of the grade and the midterm, is probably not the best use of the environment and the technology for assessing learning. So you might want to consider some alternative assessment types. And there's a couple of resources, one from UC Berkeley, and then one that we put together some time ago with some alternative types of assessments. And so if you're looking to help an instructor, if you're doing a review and you want to help an instructor improve how they are assessing learning, you want to look at the objectives, you want to look at the content, you want to look at the activities that they've designed, and then the assessments that they've designed in order to assess the learning in that particular activity. And you may be familiar with backwards design. So if you're doing a new course, you might want to start with the assessments and work your way backwards. But if you're looking at a course that's already designed, you want to see alignment among all those elements and then suggest if there's some issues with how they are choosing to assess, suggest some alternative, more authentic mechanisms for assessing learning in the online environment. And I mentioned rubrics. I have a bunch of resources on rubrics with a bunch of different types of examples of types of rubrics. You know, everything from evaluating a blog to papers to discussion boards to presentations, teamwork, all different kinds of examples of types of rubrics that are out there. And then I have some resources for faculty or instructional designers to help support academic honesty in an online course. And there are things that you can do, definitely do to support and scaffold learners in understanding, how to make sure that their work is their work or their original work, that they are, embodying academic honesty, and that they know what your expectations are around that, and parameters are around that, what the policies are around that, and that the way that you design the activities, as much as possible, mitigate some of the challenges that exist. And there are lots of challenges, right? And not just in an online environment, but in any modality. These are things that we need to pay attention to and that we need to be aware of, and we can design activities to help minimize some of the risks that are out there. And one of the main ways is to just be upfront and talk about it with students, be clear about what your policies are and your expectations, and then design activities that are going to support them in ways that they can comply. All right, so let's go over to the last one, which is Standard 50. And Standard 50 is about how do you end your course, and how do you get feedback from students so that you can, from your students, so that you can improve the design of your course. So if you're reviewing a course, you want to look at how the instructor ends the course, and check and see what are the ways that they are ending the learning community, and what are the ways that they are soliciting feedback from the students. This is not course evaluation or faculty evaluation. This is getting constructive and descriptive feedback from learners who just went through a course to get feedback that then the instructor can use to improve, or to consider to use it to improve the design of their course. And so there's lots of different ways to do that. You can do a poll, you can do some kind of a survey, you can have a farewell discussion. And if you do a survey or some sort of a poll, you want to make sure that you ask questions like, that try and get more deeply at the student experience, not just like, was the course good? Just, ask some questions that will really get the students to think about what would have helped them, to improve their participation or their engagement or their understanding in the course. And then there's some nice things that the instructor can do to sort of as a culminating activity. Again, you can do that as an online discussion just to say farewell. But there's a couple of different, there's lots of different ways, as many as there are faculty, different ways to sort of end a course. And you want to do that in an intentional way. And one of the ways that I do it is I create a video for my students, and I show them that I got to know them in that video. And there's a link to it if you want to watch it at some point in the links document. And I also have a Padlet where I ask my current students to leave feedback for my future students. So at the end of the course, they create a Padlet with all their feedback for future students of my course. And then at the beginning of my next course, I show them that feedback from the students who just completed the course. That's the set of standards that I had chosen to review with you. I wanted to also, as reviewers, I wanted to talk a little bit about how you give feedback. And so I have a couple of resources in the links document to share with you. And one is called Warm and Cool Feedback, or Providing Feedback for Online Course Reviewers. And it deals with providing warm and cool feedback. So you always, when you're giving someone a suggestion or you're wanting somebody to improve something, you always want to start, and this will work not just with course reviews, this works in general. You always want to start out with what people are doing well and what you liked about what they did, or what you saw the intention behind what they did, and to give them some positive feedback on the things that they are doing well, that you feel that they're doing well. And then you can follow up with things that you consider or that you think could use some improvement. And again, you want to do that in a way that is going to be effective, right? You want somebody to hear you, and so a criticism is not going to be there. It's hard to receive criticism, right? So you want to be kind, and you want to be specific, and you want it to be helpful, and you want a suggestion to, not come off as just because I said so, but you want to have some information in your pocket about why that, or what they would get by taking that suggestion. What is the benefit either to them in terms of efficiency or effectiveness, and what is the benefit to their students also potentially in terms of efficiency and effectiveness, so that they can hear that as not something that they're doing wrong, but something that can be improved. And if they perceive it also as a challenge, something that's going on in the design of their course as something that they would like to be different, to see it differently, then they're going to be more receptive to hearing what you have to say. And being a course reviewer, being an instructional designer is a challenge, because there are millions of different types of people out there, all with all different kinds of contexts. And so you have to kind of be able to morph yourself and your words to that person, and to what's going to help them see and hear, and then potentially implement some of the suggestions that you're making. And so it's a skill, and it gets developed over time. So the more courses that you review and the more feedback and work that you do with instructors, the better that you will get at it. So I encourage you to take a look at that document. And also I have some examples of course reviewer feedback, and kind of my process that I would recommend in terms of conducting a course review. It's a whole bulleted list. Start with the learning objectives, look at the content, look at the activities, look at the assignments. How do they provide feedback? Are the expectations and instructions clear? Do they introduce themselves? How do they create presence and build trust? How's the course structured? What are the instructions like? Are they logical and consistent? Do they use rubrics? And on and on and on. So I invite you to take a look at that. I also have some examples of feedback that I've given to instructors. And so I want to qualify and say, I'm not saying that you should give feedback the way I do. I don't capitalize things, and I use the word love a lot. I'm just showing you some examples of some feedback that I have given some faculty upon occasion. So you can take a look at that and take whatever it is that you would like to from that. But you are going to be you, and you're going to have to work within your context and within the folks that you are reviewing. All right, what's next? Let's do questions.
All right. Thanks so much, Alex, and thank you everyone for joining. There was one question in regards to the magic number of modules. Could you talk more about the research that informed that magic number and if there's anything that can be linked?
Yeah, which standard was that? Was that
I think it
um,
was course navigation.
was that 9?
I think,
My screen is
I think
frozen,
it's
Elise.
16. I think it's 16.
Let me take a look. If you open up, my screen is frozen. If you open up standard 16 and kind of scroll to where the research section is, do you see a paper by Karen Swan and me and Peter, I think it is?
I think Erin's showing her screen. Related
My,
resources.
my screen is frozen, so I can't get to wherever you guys are.
I'm also looking on our SUNY Online Teaching website.
So it's in Oscar on that particular standard. And you know what we can do? I can add it specifically to the links document after my computer releases me. I can add this specific citation, but it's research that we did some years ago, and we, asked people how many modules were in their course, and we both faculty and students, and we had a lot of control in our early days. We were centralized, and so we got 100% response rates for the surveys in those early days. This is like early 2000s. And so this particular paper was a correlational study, and I know correlation is not causation, but we did that study, and the over 9 modules, satisfaction for the faculty and satisfaction for the students went down. Over under 5, the same thing, and it's not just satisfaction; it was also perception of learning. So 2 separate questions, and that was in a study that I believe it was Karen Swan is the lead author on that one. And I believe that Peter and I, and maybe, I don't know, somebody else was on that paper. But I can put the actual citation in the links document later.
Great, thank you. And oh, someone has added 7 plus or minus 2 also goes back to Miller's paper about working memory. Thanks for adding that link in the chat too.
Yeah.
We have another question. Oh, sorry.
Or is there another question?
A follow-up question about the modules. Did the number of modules not relate to the length of class?
The number of modules not relate to the length of class.
So was it regardless of how long the semester was?
So in those days, the courses were all 15-week courses. So we didn't have anything that was shorter format in those particular days for that particular study. So, this is a really cool idea. If someone's doing a dissertation, it's a great idea. Especially if you have large numbers of faculty and courses. So, Aline, before we end, I know we're at time, but I wanted to share information about having people join the Oscar user group if you're interested in continuing the conversation about Oscar. We have an Oscar user group. We also have an online networking group for those who are interested in online teaching and learning in general, if you want to join. And it's non-SUNY and SUNY, so anyone is welcome to join. And then we also have some additional links to share from at the end of the links document. There's a bunch of additional links that we like to share. So like our YouTube playlists for for the Oscar webinars, all the Oscar webinars. We have YouTube videos and information about certification. So you have now completed half of the certification for an Oscar reviewer certification. So if you're interested in certification, you will now need to use everything that you learned in this webinar and go review a course. And then you can submit your evidence to me. And the details of that evidence you can find on the Oscar website, or you can contact me and I can give you information on the evidence that's required. And then you can show evidence of that, and I might give you feedback on that, or you might have to add a little bit here or there, but you can talk to me more about what's required for certification, and you can earn your official formal Oscar certification as a reviewer. And then we have other YouTube videos, like the one from Karen Caldwell. There's a playlist for last year's webinars, and you can find Karen's video there. And what else is in that list? My screen's frozen again, Elaine, so I can't move around.
I'm not what I see is just to mention that we will add this recording to our playlist, which I added in the chat. And we also have some webinars coming up, Oscar and RSI on April 16th, then designing an Oscar implementation plan on May 6th, both at 12 o'clock. And you can register for those on our SUNY Online webinars page. I also, did see that we have one more question, and we will hang out. But you can always find out more information on our SUNY Online Teaching website. And I want to thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, thank you.